Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel, Listen to the Earth. My name is Natalie Marshall, Director of the Flint River Regional Library System, and I'll be moderating this session. Many of us are concerned about how we can protect fragile ecosystems under threat, and we may feel overwhelmed by the scope of need. Today, we will be discussing two books addressing how ordinary people can create extraordinary change by connecting with others and the world around them in thoughtful ways. In one, a kid from Brooklyn and an indigenous naturalist team up to preserve the ancient jungles of Peru. And in the other, fervent environmentalists and lifelong boat captains work together to bring overfished waters back from the brink of destruction. And now let's welcome the nonfiction authors who've turned facts into fascinating narratives. Paul Rosolie, author of Junglekeeper, What It Takes to Change the World, forthcoming from Convergent Books, a division of Penguin Random House. And Amanda Leland, author of Sea Change, Unlikely Allies, and a Success Story of Oceanic Proportions from Torrey House Press. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you being here. We've got a lot of questions. Most of these questions are really for both of you because your books very much dovetailed, one on land, one on sea, but a lot of common elements. So we have some questions to ask you, and you guys can just take turns. Either or both can answer as you feel it. And then we do have a couple of individualized questions, and I'll let you know, I'll say your name beforehand. So
yeah, call on us. That'd be great.
Absolutely. With no further ado, let's get started here. Let's begin with a more publishing-oriented question about your books. What is it like as people of action to reflect on the work you do and to decide to turn that into a narrative for others to read? What surprised you about the process?
You want me to start, Cole? I can
start.
Yeah,
you start.
Okay. Well, it's a really great question, and I'm not a typical author, so I will say that right out of the gate. My actual job is executive director of Environmental Defense Fund. I lead one of the world's largest environmental nonprofit organizations, and I think why I felt compelled to write the book and get to this place is because there are not enough stories of progress and hope in the world, especially in the environmental sector. We're mostly focused on the problems and how things are getting worse and not better. And when there's a bright, shining example of something going well and a solution that works and people who have done hard things to make that possible, I think it's incredibly important that we share those stories with the world and we learn from that experience and have it help us address other similar challenges too. So really, I think about this as a teaching tool and as a conversation starter.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
Paul?
that's a great answer. And kind of same. It's you've heard people say before, you've heard CEOs and successful people say this thing where they go, if I could do it, then anybody could do it. And it's like, sure. And it's like, you hear so much negativity. I constantly hear people saying, the world is getting worse. It's the end of days. The ecosystems are destroyed. Or people say they feel hopeless. And it's like, yeah, but JJ was an indigenous guy who was born without shoes. I'm a dyslexic kid who failed out of high school before I went to college and spent my late teens and early 20s living in the Amazon. And now we're protecting 130,000 acres of the Amazon rainforest in the headwaters in the most pristine part. And so, yeah, it's sort of telling people, this is a frontline account. Here is what's going on in the Amazon because people don't understand, they don't understand what are the forces that are really destroying the Amazon. And people feel hopeless. It can't be stopped. There's nothing we can do. No, there is something we can do. It's not rocket science to not cut down trees. We just have to figure out how to make people not do it. And so it's like there's a pragmatic way that you can chase these goals. And I think for a lot of people, just like Amanda said, you can read these books and then it's a roadmap for people. They go, oh, well, if they can figure this out, maybe I can do something or help a project. And so that becomes a very important sort of fire starter for them to pass on that flame of that we can do this.
Absolutely. And I'd actually like to pick up on that. One of the questions that we have in front of us here is about that pragmatism, because it did jump out at me in both of the books that you guys have written. So the programs in your books, they include methods of employment that are intended to redirect people from environmentally exploitative processes towards ecologically sustainable and regenerative ones. Can you talk about how you build that trust to get people to take that journey with you and the space to make that spread those programs? And like, what challenges do you see that model facing? That's a lot. Let me know if you need to repeat anything. But that is one of those things that absolutely grabbed out at me about both of your books, was creating that positive change.
I could,
Well, why don't you start?
I'll
Yeah.
take this one first,
Right.
because mine's been really fun. And a lot of people, when I post images of deforestation in the Amazon, people will be, you know, the comments will be like, you know, we need to kill those loggers. Loggers are evil. And it's like, sure, you know, some people will be like, oh, just send me to the Amazon with a machine gun. And like, that's great. I'm glad you're mad. That's helpful. Now, let's look at this realistically, because I went down there, and me and JJ, who's this indigenous conservationist that I befriend and who becomes my mentor and best friend, we would go and have beers with the loggers, because they're just guys. They're not evil. They're just people. And so they're just people with chainsaws, and that's how they make their living. And so when we created Junglekeepers and we started saying, okay, how do we protect this land? We'd go talk to the landowner and say, you know, are you going to cut down this 10,000 acres of rainforest? And they go, yeah, we're going to just let the loggers go in and just cut all the trees. So then we'd go talk to the loggers and we'd say, hey man, what are you doing? And they go, well, we're cutting down the trees. And they go, how much do you get paid a day? And they'd say, $30 a day. Super dangerous. Tree fell on my leg a month ago. My leg is broken. I got a sick kid. We're living out here in the jungle. There's malaria and there's jaguars, and it's really dangerous, but you know, this is what we're doing. And we go, cool. What if we paid you double that to not cut down the trees, and instead we'll give you a uniform and medical benefits and a community and a boat, and you don't have to do any of this hard labor. Just walk around and use the expertise you have from living in the jungle to help us protect it. And these people went, they go, absolutely. When, like, where do I sign? They're so excited. And so we take these people that you would think are your enemies, we just hire them, and then they become our friends. And usually they know, I mean, this model has been used in Africa. They've taken elephant poachers and said, hey, look, we'll pay you to protect them. And then because they've been poaching them and they've been tracking them and they've been living out in the bush, they're usually local people. They're so excited to have a job that they'll do anything. And so you realize that there's a lot that could be fixed on planet Earth if we employed that strategy more of understanding your enemies, understanding their motivations, and giving them an opportunity to make good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Amanda, that kind of dovetails a little bit with the work that y'all have been doing with fishermen and catch shares.
Yeah, so so much of what Paul just said deeply resonates. And there's a couple things I'll just pull forward. One is it really does make a difference to show up at the bar with the person that you're trying to befriend. So you and I have that commonality too. The success story in the Sea Change book would not have happened without many hours existing in their space, whatever that space is. For us, it's the dock with the fishermen, or it's the local bar, or it's wherever they are. We have to show up there. So I think that's important. And another is, to your point, I think it really makes a difference if you can help demonstrate an economic model that can work for their livelihood, right? So when we were in the work that we did here in the Gulf Coast of the United States, where we worked with fishermen to co-design a new management strategy for the fishery that was collapsing, and I can get into what that was like and why it was so terrible, but it was collapsing. And one of the things that we did was go person to person in the fishery and sort of pencil out how their livelihoods could be better if they made this strategic choice to change management, because they had to vote in favor of this new system. It was very much in their hands. And so we did that, and it took a long time. We co-designed it with them, and then we penciled out what the numbers would look like. And it turns out, it overperforms actually, even in the first year, and the fishermen all did better. And so one thing I often talk about is how incredibly important it is for the solutions that we design to improve people's lives quickly. You need a tight feedback loop between what, like, their livelihood or their reality or their community or whatever it is, and then what environmental progress you're trying to achieve. And I think that's when you get lasting progress that will hold firm through political upheaval or economic upheaval, because they have skin in the game. Then they know that it's going to be better for them, and they fight to protect that.
Absolutely. And Amanda, I'd love to dig deeper on that if I could with you. Because in your book, Buddy represents a kind of everyday career fisherman, as well as being very much his own person. I love that element of the book, bringing his personality onto the page. How do you see the process of getting folks like Buddy to buy into the concept? And what information is the most important to give them and obviously get from them? And does the packaging matter?
Yeah, so I think some of what I just said is relevant to this
Yes.
question too. I should say that Buddy Gwendon is the lead character in the story Sea Change. He's a real person. I'm actually sitting right now at his fish house in Galveston, Texas. When he's, if you go back into the Wayback Time Machine of 20 years ago, the headlines all over the place were about how overfishing, the oceans were emptying of seafood. I don't know if you remember those days. I do. It was one of the top environmental crises to solve. And collapsing ecosystems meant collapsing coastal economies, collapsing communities, collapsing families, because fishing was the most dangerous job in the United States by a lot for a long time. You might remember the show Deadliest Catch. I don't know. But so there was a whole management system that sort of made that collapse happen. Good people tried to do the right things, but it didn't work. And the system needed to change. And so again, it was about getting the fishermen to understand how this change could benefit them and benefit the long-term health of the resource. And one of the best parts of the story, I don't want to spoil too much, is that Buddy is the biggest opponent. He's the highliner. He's the fisherman who earns the most and catches the most in this fishery called red snapper here on the Gulf Coast. And he has a lot at stake, and he doesn't want to lose his competitive edge. But the rest of the fishermen, well, the vast majority of the fishermen vote to approve this program. It goes into implementation, and then he looks at his books 3 months in, and his costs have dropped 80%, because fuel is their main cost of running a fishing business, and they can cut their fuel. And the prices go up, so they get more fish, more price per pound at the dock. There are reasons why this happens, but it does. And then he becomes convinced this is good for him. So I think one of the most important lessons here is, like, how do you help get the people at the table so that they have some ownership over it? And how do you ensure that that ownership lasts over time, and that they really have skin in the game on conservation, and that they see that that's going to improve their lives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And showing the math really makes a difference.
Well, the math does help. Yes.
If you can show the math, when they can say, oh, I see it. Absolutely. I love that. Indeed.
Yes.
And Paul, I see how this, with your Junglekeepers organization, you have a lot of these same elements, and then you have that additional element that you're reaching a worldwide audience of contributors and donors. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit of a question about that. One of the anecdotes in your books that really caught me, and I got to tell you, I am not a snake girly. Nope, not my thing. I know. But when you talk about your encounters with the giant anacondas in the Peruvian jungle, and in particular, you talked about that early attempt where you basically end up riding a female on an anaconda, for lack of a better word. And it was very moving how you talked about that and your subsequent attempts to track those animals and what it meant for you. Can you talk about what it meant to bring the concept of these deep jungle animals to people living in places where you can't even conceive of that? Like talking about the largest ever, the one you named after your grandma, you know.
Eleanor. Yeah.
And Eleanor, yes. And like, what does it mean to bring that to a worldwide audience? And what kind of gaps of understanding do you feel like this bridges for your organization?
Well, that's a very good question because there's two things. First of all, I feel like, the only reason we're here is because of ecosystems. Let's start there. If you can't breathe the air and drink the water, then nothing else you're interested in is going to happen. That's a Carl Sagan quote. And like for animals, people are so anthropocentrically focused. They don't think about the world outside of humans. And now I think it's, 60% of the humans on Earth live in cities. I've always been concerned with animals and their welfare, and whether that's elephants or anacondas or whatever. It's like these are other consciousnesses that are existing on the same planet as us that we are decimating. And so to be able to go deep into the Amazon, and I mean, this is what I love. And so for me, going to see the largest anacondas on Earth comes naturally because it's what I'm fascinated by. But then to someone who's never been on a hike, let alone into the depths of the Amazon 3 weeks on a boat, it sounds like you're talking about dragons and unicorns. Like it doesn't sound realistic. The line of, I was riding this anaconda, this 25-foot snake, and people just shake their head and go, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "There's a snake so big that I couldn't catch it." And so when I jumped on her back, and they're like, "You jumped on her back?" And so for me, it's been, the anacondas gave us the power to reach a lot of people because those sort of crazy stories got people interested. Whereas I feel like if I had gone in and said, "Hey, there's 372 species of, fishing bat in the area," and they're, it's like people might not be as excited as just the shock factor of giant snakes. But what happens then is that then you become the voice for the voiceless. Jane Goodall was big on talking about how like animals can't go to, address Congress or protest or, speak at the United Nations. And so the people who understand them and their worlds have to do that. And so when I do my job, that when it's not in the jungle, whether I'm talking to a classroom or corporation, it's like I realize I am there speaking for the animals that will never be, they're living in their trees in the depths of the jungle. We're protecting all this jungle. And so that's the job we're doing, is trying to protect their home, and which would be completely bulldozed and burned to extinction if we didn't do it. And so that's the why behind all the craziness. People go, why would you do this? Why would you spend 3 weeks living in a tent and almost dying to go jump on an anaconda's back? And why would you jump on the anaconda's back? It's like, well, if people could see that snake, they would be so, like Eleanor, the picture of our team holding this 20-foot snake. When people see these things, they become inspired and they think differently, and they go, "Oh, wow, I haven't thought about the fact that the Amazon is disappearing, and oh my God, there's a way I can help it to not disappear." And it's, there's a whole thought chain that can be achieved by showing people these amazing things that they didn't know maybe still existed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That kind of thing is just very moving, and I do think it makes a real connection to the people across the world. I want to take it back a little bit, and I want to talk about how y'all think that your early experiences led you towards these careers, these callings in ecological preservation, in rebuilding. Was there a moment or a series of moments that caused you to realize this is it? This is what I'm meant to be doing?
You're up.
You want me to start? Okay. We're going to jump into the Wayback Time Machine again to 20-ish years ago. I was a graduate student, a marine biology graduate student in Maine. And I was doing research on a collapsed fishery, one of many at the time. And there were two really important things that happened in that context. One is that I had fishermen as part of my research team. And this was we were looking at whether we could recover this particular animal. It's a sea urchin. I don't know if you know what a sea urchin is, but they're round and spiky. They're used in uni and sushi and other things. And it was a boom and bust fishery in Maine. And at the time, like 10 years before I came on the scene, they were so prevalent that you could actually see them through aerial photography and the shallow subtitle. Like that's how many there were.
Right.
And when I came on the scene, you could strap a scuba tank on my back and I could swim for hours and never see a single urchin. That's how quickly this system
Wow.
changed from overfishing. And it got, and the fishermen used to say to me, like, this was a regular occurrence, if I don't take the last one, someone else will.
Whoa.
Right.
And this is in the book because they're not the only fishermen who've said this to me, but this is the one that really grabbed me. It's like when you think about that statement, you sort of ponder that.
Mhm.
There is the only way is down. There's nothing about a future in that statement. There's nothing about my day, tomorrow's going to be better than it is today. The
Mhm.
only way is down, and it's desperate. So that's thing one. And then thing two that happened in that context was I used to have to go and present my research at these fishery management meetings with regulators and fishermen in the room. And the situation got so heated on some occasions that policemen used to have to stand by my side and they would put their hands on their holster.
Yeah.
I'm a, 20-something-year-old graduate student just trying to do my science. And it was animosity at its worst. Everybody was blaming everybody else for the situation and nobody wanted to find a path forward or could even think about it. So the
Mhm.
fishermen thought, it's all the scientists' fault. There's plenty of them out there. We need to go get them. The scientists are like, well, we got to keep ratcheting back and telling the regulators we need to do more, cut the catch even more. And that just, I was like, I don't want to be the scientist who writes the epitaph of global fisheries because this was happening everywhere, all the same time. And I said, I want to fix the problem. I want to do something to change this. And the story in Sea Change is a beginning of that. And then it emanates out from the Gulf Coast to other parts of the United States and other parts of the world. And today, 20 years later, 90% of fisheries in the United States are sustainable or on the path of being so, like at the tail end of rebuilding. And that is a
Tremendous.
phenomenal outcome, like in a pretty short period of time. And that's happening, there's improvements around the world. More than 40 countries are now using this management strategy that's been proven to work time and time again for fish and fishermen. And I'm really proud of that. And it really has its beginnings in sort of the slap of reality that hit me
Mhm.
of people. Nobody wants to be in that desperate place. And when you
Right.
sit down and you talk to each other, you can almost always find a path forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially that nobody wants to be the person grabbing the last one, but they don't want to be the person who doesn't.
Exactly, because that's the system they're trapped in. Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Paul, how about you? You talk a lot about your childhood and how you ended up in Peru.
Hmm.
How did you know that this was what you were meant to do?
Well, that's a great question. I didn't know that this was what I was meant to do. I knew, I knew what I wasn't meant to do.
Mhm.
I knew what I didn't like, and I never did good in school. I never liked sitting still. I felt good in the forest. I felt bad in the classroom. And of course, all my teachers said, "You don't like the desk now." They said, "Wait till you get to your office after you graduate and you're an adult." And I said, "Man, that's not how it's going to go." And I'd read, books, man. I'd read, about Teddy Roosevelt and Jane Goodall, and I said, "Are these other people?" I kept my worst fear was that I was born in the wrong time when I was younger, and I was like, how come they had these adventurous lives where they, by 20 something, they're out there researching chimps or reporting on the war and doing all this amazing stuff, and I'm stuck there, and they're like, "Why didn't you do your homework?" I was like, "This is stupid." So
Mhm.
I got my GED and dropped out of high school. I had very supportive parents that understood that I was not having a good time. And
Mhm.
I said, "Look, I've spent my entire life so far listening to what everybody else has told me to do. Sit down, go to school, do your homework, blah, blah, blah." And I just said, "You know what?" I said, as I turned 18, I was like, "I'm going to just buy a ticket to the Amazon rainforest and go see it." I'd heard my
Mhm.
whole life that it was being cut down. I was stressed about it since I was a child. I loved animals and walking in streams and going camping. I mean, again, nature of any sort is just where I can't even be in the city for a few days because I start to miss the trees. I need to fall asleep to the sound of a forest. Um, and then when I got to the jungle, you know, it really is all there. There really are leaf cutter ants. It's like, you know, you go to Jurassic Park and they're like, it's not really going to be dinosaurs. And it's like, no, there really are. There's big crocodiles and anacondas and harpy eagles that could lift a child off the ground if they wanted to. And there's still, you know, and also like, it's almost like a time capsule. You know, there's still uncontacted tribes with arrows and narco traffickers and gold miners. And it's so wild and so different from the regulated safety of the northeastern United States where I grew up. And I just went, I said, this is Adventureland. And so then at first it was a very selfish thing. That's just where I was interested. That's just what made me excited, what turned me on. And then after years and years, there was a period where when we saw it being cut down, I looked to JJ, who as the indigenous conservationist, I said, isn't there something we can do? I said, there has to be somebody we could call. They can't just cut down trees like that. And he went, do you see anybody? Said, look right, look left, look north. He goes, you see anybody out here? He goes, about 100 miles in every direction. He goes, there is nobody. I said, well, call the police. He goes, there's no police out here. He said, we're past the police. We're out in the middle of nowhere. And he said, if you want to do anything, if you want to stop this, you're going to have to do it yourself. We're going to have to do it together. And you know, and at that time you're 20 something, you go, well, I can't do anything. And so you just start telling the story, start writing the story down, telling it to everybody that'll listen. Be like, there's this thing happening and it's terrible. And so it wasn't that I knew what I had to do. It was just that I have a very good internal compass and I knew which direction I should go in. And so it was really just walking blindfolded in the direction of the sound of the forest. That's it. And then at some point, you know, you end up holding the bag and people going, well, you're there. So what's the answer? And we're like, well, we have to protect it. And like, you grow into the role. You discover the path as you go on it.
So you're building the airplane while you're flying it.
That's right. Yeah. And or like, you know, you imagine like that somewhere in some fantasy thing where it's like, you know, they walk off the cliff and the magical pathway appears as they take the steps, but it's not clear beforehand that that's even going to exist. And it's like, well, I just figured I was going to go on some wild adventures and have fun to make up for being, you know, incarcerated as a child in school. I was angry about that. And then it ended up turning into, you know, something completely different. So I guess, you know, follow what ignites your and inspires you.
I think you can't do better than that. You know, we're winding towards our last couple of minutes. It goes so fast. So I think like the last thing that I wanted to ask y'all is to wrap up, what do you most want people to take away from the stories you're telling, the work you're engaged in? What is the one thing that you want people to reach for? That's impossible, I know, because you've written these wonderful books about all the things, but if there's one thing that you're not sure if people are going to grasp, or there's one takeaway that y'all want, what is it?
You first, man.
Okay. I'd like to, I'm going to do 3, but I'll make them quick. Okay. So the 3 lessons that I think are really relevant to the world in which we live today, which is wildly different than 20 years ago. One is that heroes can be hiding in plain sight. I think that we don't do enough to celebrate regular people who do extraordinary things, not because they raise their hand, but because they kind of just do it. And in the book Sea Change, Buddy Linden is one of those characters. The second is that when you talk to people you disagree with and you actually listen to them, you can, you know, almost always find a path forward. And the third is, now I'm thinking of my third thing. I've lost it.
Oh no.
It's actually the point I made actually earlier that which is the solutions that last are the ones that very quickly benefit people in their regular lives. And so those are sorry about that in the loss of my third thing, but those are the 3 things. I think it's about the people, it's about the solutions you choose, and it's about listening to each other and hearing each other and moving forward together.
100%. 100%. Paul?
Great answer. Also, I love your point about that. If you're not sitting at the table with the people you disagree with, then they're never going to listen to you. At least if you make friends with them, if you have like, and this is important for everyone everywhere right now.
Everyone. Yeah, agree.
You be talking to them and be civil and be friendly in order for there to be hope for you to say, hey, look, this is why I think what I think. That conversation is never going to happen unless you go have a beer with them. So that is an incredibly powerful
Great.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great note to end on. Talk out your differences, look for the heroes, show the results. Thank you both so much for being here. I can't express what a wonderful experience it was to read your books and then to have the opportunity to talk with you. I want to thank you for being part of today's conversation. And next, we're about to have a short break. And thank you so much to everyone who jumped on with us today, all our participants who are watching this. There's going to be a short break. So if you haven't already, make sure you would visit the exhibit hall to chat with the representatives. There are free resources. Thanks once again to these amazing authors to joining us for talking about this work. And I really hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.